introductions which we've done, I'd like to introduce you to the course that we're doing, this webinar. It's going to take you through a few different subjects, different topics that we think you need to know. The first one will be connectivity and the type of Wi-Fi, broadband, and the differences, and the laptop specifications, gigahertz, RAM, and all the different internal gubbins of the computer. Software, different softwares to use, different softwares to buy, and then the different downloads. We have a page of downloads, which might be handy for you. Data protection and security, which kind of speaks for itself. Where to buy laptops and getting the best deal, and a short spurt on assistive technology, summary, Q&A. Okay, all right, we'll start with first slide, connectivity, please, Emily.
Okay, so we're basically trying to provide some basic information that people might need when they're purchasing hardware. And so one of the first things you might want to think about is what kind of connectivity you're going to be needing or that you've got available. So which obviously dictates what capability the laptop's going to have to have. So most people are using the typical kind of broadband and wired connection into their existing home or office. So that utilizes your existing telephone line to provide you with a connection to the internet. As that comes into your space, you'll typically have a device known as a router, and that's connected to the broadband connection, and that will from there provide you with Wi-Fi so that you can connect wirelessly. So we should bear in mind that
computers can connect.
Sorry.
No idea.
I was a bit confused by that. So sorry. So the things we should think about is that basically an Ethernet connection, i.e. one where you're using a cable that's plugged directly into the router, is going to be faster and it's going to be more stable, but it's less mobile and less convenient, because the router will only have like 3 or 4 inputs on it, whereas Wi-Fi will allow you to have as many connections as you are probably likely to have. There are other types of dedicated lines that a building could be connected with, but generally speaking, it's going to be broadband. So moving on from those options, if you don't have that kind of connectivity available, you could consider the possibility of a prepaid dongle, such as sorry, we can move on to the next slide at this point as well, please. So there are MiFi dongles, which are basically work with the same sort of connectivity options that you have on your
usually
mobile.
a little smarter than a smartphone.
What is that? Emily? Sorry, Emily?
Yeah, sorry. I don't know what that is either. I thought it was maybe like, is your computer reading something out?
No,
okay.
no, nothing.
Yeah, it sounds like a screen
not
reader
even-
because it's text that's on your slide.
Yeah, but I'm not seeing anyone.
As with the mobile broadband dongle, MiFi is offered on monthly or yearly contracts, as well as pay-as-you-go tariffs. MiFi taps into 4G or 5G. I think someone is reading out the slides. I don't know who that is.
Hey, you know what, they're doing really well, aren't they?
No, screen reader's off.
Yeah, I mean, it might be somebody else's screen reader or somebody just reading them aloud for some reason. So can everyone just keep themselves on mute? So
one of the biggest advantages of MiFi is that they require.
No,
good, isn't it? Really good
screen reader's off. Definitely off.
okay, I think I may have figured out what was happening. So go ahead. I think I fixed it.
Okay,
Let's try to
so
move on.
so some of the biggest advantages of MiFi is that, as that really good reader was just saying, is that it doesn't take much setup. It's actually really easy. It's pretty much plug and play, And so it doesn't have that, even broadband, there's a bit of config to be done. And Wi-Fi, you have to go through the whole business of setting up a password, etc. But with this, it really is like you can just plug it in and away you go. Next slide, please. Yeah, just also continue on a similar theme, just pointing out that these devices are charged pretty much like a mobile phone. And we also want to mention a process known as tethering, where you could use your existing mobile phone data and set your phone up as basically a Wi-Fi hotspot, and then you could connect your laptop to that.
How do you do that? How do you actually tether a phone to a laptop? What is the process?
Well, the phone will have software on it which you can enable, and it basically gives you a Wi-Fi hotspot that you can then connect to. You'll have to put a password into your laptop that you've set up just then. And basically, it's a kind of like a very long-winded workaround to getting on the internet, because again, you're going to be using up your mobile data. So there's going to be a cap to that. It's going to be metered.
Okay.
So also, we know that Vodafone have recently announced the commitment to tackle digital exclusion and connect 1 million people by the end of 2022. And any charity in the UK can apply for free connectivity. So this comes in the form of SIM cards, and they're giving you 20 gigabytes of data plus free calls and text for 6 months. It's a SIM card that will work in any SIM-enabled device. So that's a phone, a tablet, a laptop, or a MiFi dongle.
All right, and for any more information on that, I suggest you try to contact your local digital organization or inclusivity organization via Lambeth, any charity that may be such as Tech Aid. I know they're taking up the offer, so maybe you can, their phone number will be available later, so maybe you can talk to them regarding how to register and if you can obtain a SIM card. Next slide, please, Emily.
Right, so we're moving on to the actual specifications of the laptop. We should bear in mind that what came out of that last section is that if you are hoping to plug an Ethernet cable into the laptop, you need to be aware that not all laptops are fitted with those anymore necessarily. So it's just something to check and think about before you dive into the market. So now we're going to be talking about the more specific elements of the laptop itself, what you need to do, what you need to look for, and what you need to know. The next slide. So first of all, we want to talk about storage. So there's two main types of storage that we're using when we're using a computer. There's the hard drive, which is our form of permanent storage, i.e., the data that's on our device after we turn it on. So that it's got a place it's got information that it starts with, and this is as distinct from the type of storage known as memory or RAM, which stands for random access memory. So if you think of the example of a Word document, that you say, for example, you've worked on a Word document yesterday and you saved it, and you turn on your computer today, you turn on your laptop, and you go to open that document. What's actually happening is it's reading it from the permanent storage of your hard drive into the memory, into RAM, and that's where you actually get to edit the document. And so when you click save, what's happening is that it's writing the contents of that document out of the memory and back onto the hard disk. And this is why if you have some sort of problem, if there's a power cut or your computer crashes, then any work you were doing that was stored only in RAM would be gone. And so the next time you open that document, it'll be back how it was when you originally opened it the first time. So one of the other elements which you should remember is that accessing the memory is obviously very, very fast. It works by accessing data thousands of times more quickly than the data that's accessed from a hard drive.
What if I bought a second-hand computer? Some of the computers to be bought are going to be refurbished, and they won't all have SSD drives, and they will have HDD drives.
Yeah, sorry, I was just coming to that. So the hard drive, which like as I say, is where data is more permanently stored. There's been a breakthrough in technology in the last few years where there's a much faster type of hard drive now. And so when you look at the specifications of a laptop that you're reading about, it will quite often say HDD, which means hard drive, but it will normally be talking about the older of those two types. If it's a faster type, the SSD, then it will clearly be described as SSD. So they're both types of hard drive. They're both types of storage that persists after the machine is powered down. But SSD works at a much, much faster rate. So they're dramatically faster than the old mechanical drives, but they're also smaller in capacity. So typically speaking, you're going to get the same size hard drive. Say, for example, if you had a terabyte hard drive, which is a large amount of storage space, if you had it in the older style, then it's going to be reasonably cheap. But the price of a 1 terabyte SSD drive, it would still be really quite high. So they tend to be smaller in capacity. Like typically now at a lower end laptop, you might be looking at 64 gigabytes of capacity, or 128 or 256, but not really getting much bigger than that yet.
Will that limit me in any way?
Well, it really does depend on how much data you're looking to store on a device. So the 1 terabyte is really quite a lot of data. I would have thought most of the people who we're interacting with are not going to be looking at those kind of needs. It's really maybe perhaps if you're doing something like storing a lot of video,
Photographs and
yeah, if you've got a lot of data and it's data that's taking up a lot of space.
okay.
So when we talk about amounts of RAM, probably 4 gigabytes is the minimum that you would want to see on a machine in this day and age, because to even run Windows 10 comfortably, you really do need at least 4 gigabytes of RAM. 8 gigabytes has now become pretty much a kind of average machine spec, and it's probably quite rare that anybody that's involved here today is going to need more than 16 gigabytes of RAM, because after that you really are not going to benefit from having RAM that isn't actually getting used. Bearing in mind that this is the storage that you're using while the machine is on. Next slide, please. Okay, so we need to think also about the CPU, which is the central processing unit. So this is the main chip that's on the motherboard, and pretty much every device has the CPU. It has a CPU, whether it's a tablet, a phone, a laptop. They've all got the main processing unit on the motherboard, which is responsible for processing and executing all of the instructions that are sent from the application. So the faster this particular chip is capable of going, the faster the whole machine is going to run. And this is generally measured in a unit known as gigahertz. So it's almost as simple as looking at how high that number is, except that processor technology has now reached a stage where they're improving speed, not by just sheer speed of a processor as such, but by the number of processors that are working together within the overall CPU. And so these are referred to as cores. And so you would need to appreciate that even if the CPU is measured at a certain speed, if it has double the number of cores of a comparable machine, it really will be capable of achieving a lot more work in the same amount of time. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we're also sort of throwing in the possibility of using wireless peripheral devices like mouse and keyboard. So this might be for a number of different reasons, or you might just not like the clutter of wires. We're not talking about base unit anyway, so, but it just gives you the option of being a little bit more mobile or a bit more flexible in where the person using the machine is sat. So we also need to think about how much screen size we want to have. So the ideal size for a monitor depends on its resolution and how far you're sitting from the screen. And it's important to remember that it's a laptop, so the screen probably isn't going to be that big. You can get high-end laptops that have fairly sizable screens, but if screen space is really an issue for you, then you need to think about the possibility of plugging in external monitors. And so there are also high-end laptops that will give you more than a single graphic output. So you could actually use dual screens, which is ideal when you're working with different programs simultaneously.
Can I just say something about keyboards for a start? They're probably going to be preferable more for people with disabilities, probably, who has to sit in a certain position in a certain space. Also, I mean, they have braille keyboards, many size keyboards, which I will go into in a deep dive session. But also bear in mind that if you do have people in your organization and you're buying the laptops now, please think about that. And also please think about the screen size and the screen readers, etc. Because the screen size is very important if you have visual problems. Very difficult to read if you've got a 12-inch screen. You need at least a minimum of 16-inch screen, 18-inch. And though it might be heavier and not so portable, but please think about that as well when you purchase your screens and keyboards. And also when you buy a laptop, you can buy a separate screen as well, in addition. So you can always plug a different keyboard separate to the laptop. And also you can buy an independent screen and plug that into the laptop. So even though you buy a small laptop, it doesn't negate you from serving all your clients.
Next slide. Okay, so another consideration when you're looking at buying a laptop is going to be the number of different things you want to plug into it. So if you know that you've got a number of USB devices that you want to connect, then it's advisable to buy a machine that's got that number, a higher number of USB. Some laptops will come, they'll only have two USB ports, whereas others will have 4 or more. And also we need to think about the fact that USB-C is now becoming quite prevalent, which is slightly different USB interface in the sense that it doesn't matter which way round it gets plugged in. The old USB could only go in one way up, whereas these go in either way up. And if you've got old USB devices that you're hoping to plug in, you're going to need an adapter to go from one to the other. So there are also other things that we might want to plug in or connect. So if we're going to use external screens, it's going to be plugged in via the old standard VGA port, which your laptop may or may not be fitted with. Probably more likely these days that it would have HDMI outputs. Or there is also a smaller version of that known as the display port.
But the HDMI inputs are two different sizes as well, aren't they? You can have a larger HDMI and a smaller HDMI.
Well, there's one that's a lot more common, I'd say, but okay.
Well, again, I'm just thinking about if I buy a refurbished laptop, it might not always have the high spec
Sorry,
that we're
yeah,
looking
we need
for.
to think about yeah, the older stuff that is still around.
The older versus the new. On the later on one of the screens, it shows different places you can buy laptops who are selling high spec modern day laptops, which will have all these the new tech on it. And they're reasonably priced, actually, very reasonably priced. You can buy a really good Lenovo in pristine condition notebook for about 150 quid. Which means if you've got £5,000 to sort of spend on these, it gives you a lot of laptops, and it'll give you all the specifications that you need, and that Othman's talking about.
Next slide. Okay, so here we've just got like a basic specification. That'd be kind of like a low end. The specifications for a low endish kind of laptop, isn't it? 8 gigabytes of RAM, so it's kind of comfortably run Windows. 120 gigabytes of SSD, which will give you enough space to store your operating system and have some storage space, and also would be part of it, would contribute quite a lot to its performance.
Can you tell me about the i5, the difference between an i3, i5, and i7 processor, and why they're so different, and why we need to take note of that?
I don't know a lot about those processor scale.
Well,
generally, as processors generations move on, though, it's obviously like they're just running at a faster clock speed, and they may or may not have a greater number of cores. So it's as each generation of processor comes along, obviously it's bigger and better, faster and more powerful.
What's the clock speed?
Clock speed is the gig. When I talked about gigahertz, this is a technical term. A hertz is something that happens, a number of times something happens in a second. So if you think about it, a gigahertz, I guess it's saying that something's happening billions of times per second. And so that is how many times, that's how many clocks there are for the processor. So each operation that the processor does will generally take, or the most basic operation that the processor does will take up 1 clock cycle.
Does that mean it's faster? If I get an i5 and i7, which is the faster? Are they faster?
Yeah, well, each generation of processors is going faster than the one before, either by having a greater clock speed or by just having more cores. So more processors crammed into the processor.
Because we're all familiar with that putting your laptop and it's winding through ages and ages and ages to boot up.
That isn't usually because of the processor. That might well be because of there's a problem, or because the reading back from the hard drive is the slowest operation that the machine has to do.
What can I do about that? What do I do to make a computer run faster? In simple terms, I mean, if it was, say, like I lent a laptop from the library, what can I do to make, or can I do anything to make that laptop run faster when I get it?
Well, if it's already running what it's running, then probably isn't a lot, no, because it's either there's something wrong with it, or that's just how it's going to be, isn't it? Unless you've got permission to kind of completely reinstall all of the software on there.
Okay, thank you.
Should we move on to another slide? Okay, so we're now going to start talking about software and how that impacts your choices and your decision in what kind of machine you're going to need to buy. So the most basic piece of software that we're going to need is the actual operating system, which is kind of like the program that runs all the other programs. The operating system is basically the thing that, if you think about Windows, the operating system is the thing that puts the start button there and enables you to be able to start and stop the other programs. That's kind of like the overall controlling piece of software. So the operating systems come preloaded on any computer you purchase, usually. And it's possible to change or upgrade the operating system. And the 3 most popular operating systems are the Apple one, so that's iOS or Windows, which probably a lot of people are most familiar with. And there's also another one called Linux, which runs on the same kind of hardware that Windows would run on, but is actually open source and therefore is available free, which might sound great. And I know it is my favorite operating system, but the drawback with Linux is that major vendors of software may well not compile their software to run on Linux. So for example, Microsoft Office is not going to be compatible, or Photoshop. Lots of these big packages are not being made available on Linux.
Neither is Dragon. Neither is I use speech to text software that also won't run on Linux. So there are setbacks, there are pitfalls to these. There are a lot of cons and pros to all of these systems. But if I get a refurbished laptop, this is Windows 7, unfortunately, this might happen. What do I do to update it to Windows 10? What can I do?
Well, first of all, you'd want to think about whether it's actually got the specifications needed to do that successfully. You might find that because as I mentioned before, if it's got less than 4 gigabytes of RAM, you're probably going to be quite painful trying to run Windows 10 on it.
Okay.
Other than that, though, Microsoft will give you a clear upgrade path where you can, obviously for a fee, you have to get a license to run the Windows 10 on it. But because now they're not. To begin with, they offered a free path, I think. But now but once you've overcome that, then it's a question of just running a setup process.
I hear Windows 11 is coming out. Now, like everything, we should get what we need, not what we would like. So would you suggest that we avoid that for now and not be taken in by a new software because it's the updated thing, and would you remain in Windows 10? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to wait for a little while until that's been around for a while and people have kind of ironed out some of the bugs and some of the issues that might be there to begin with.
Okay. If I get a secondhand Apple as well, we've got different iOS 13, iOS 14, iOS 15. What's our operating system number do I need to look for?
Well, Apple are very clear about what versions of their operating systems will run on their existing hardware. So for any particular model of an Apple machine, you'll be able to just look up and see what operating systems are going to be compatible and supported, and they basically pretty much stop you from going outside of that.
I know, right, Linux, as you said, it's available on download and your favorite software. Would you recommend an expert put that on, or would you recommend that anybody can download that?
That really is a matter of personal choices, because it's quite a tech-oriented thing to try to do. So I wouldn't say it's for enthusiasts or people who feel technically competent or just are up for a challenge.
Okay, next slide, please.
Okay, so we've just got some download links here for, trying to encourage people to download Debian Linux or Ubuntu. And that's also where you can download the current Windows 10 ISO. And we've also kind of done a little bit of research about where you might want to source a laptop from.
What's an ISO?
Oh, sorry. An ISO is a file which basically describes the contents of a CD or DVD. So it's a file that you would normally get and then burn that onto a DVD and then use that to boot your machine up. Or these days you might burn it or transfer it onto a USB stick. So it's like a disk image file that you can then recreate other disks from and then start up the computer just using that, and it's going to take you through the process of installing whatever is on there.
So I can't just follow the link and install it straight away, like the Debian or Ubuntu Linux. I can't just go onto a link, press the button, and just press download.
Yeah, you can, but what you'll download is going to be like a largish file that needs to be used in a certain way. So it's going to be because if you think about how to install the operating system on a computer, you're going to have to begin that process with starting from scratch. You can't run it from inside the existing operating system you've already got. It's going to have to be that the computer boots up from the disk that you've made, and then the installer takes over from there and installs the operating system, which will include wiping. Very often will include wiping the disk of any information that was on there before.
So whilst it's free, guys, I suggest you leave it to a technician to come and do for you, to get loaded properly. On the list is also some laptop suppliers. I was telling you earlier on about laptopstation.co.uk. They have some awesome laptops, Asus, AMD, not AMD, Lenovo, etc. So very good prices. And also, I suggest you have a look at eBay too. They've got some laptops which are reconditioned. And the good thing about that is most of the organizations, most of the dealers on there offer a guarantee. And also, if the laptop breaks down for any reason within that time, you can return it. If they don't give you a refund back, eBay themselves will refund you. And also to have a look on amazon.co.uk. They have some, obviously mainly new laptops, but now and again you find a list of the same model reconditioned. These reconditioned laptops come from Argos and companies that have been, the laptops have been resent back after purchase. So they're not secondhand per se, they're just laptops that have been already opened. So it's always good if you can bag one of those as well. They're very good prices and come with full guarantee. I've said that, haven't I? Yes. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the first thing you need to think about, we're talking about the software that you're actually going to do stuff with, because the operating system is basically kind of in the background and it's just makes it all possible. But what you're really trying to use on a computer is, you know, for example, Microsoft Word or Photoshop or whatever it is you're actually going to try and do with it. And so the first consideration that you're going to have when thinking about that is that it needs to be compatible with the operating system. So we've just talked about how there's Windows, there's Apple iOS, and there's Linux, and there are others as well. There's a whole range of different operating systems out there, and just not in great numbers. So the first consideration when you're going to go and buy, say, Microsoft Office is going to be that you need to buy the version that matches your operating system. So if you're running Windows, you need to buy the Windows version, not the, if you did end up with the Mac version, it's entirely unusable, and vice versa. Also, the software it may be, depending on how involved, what it's going to try to do is it may specify some minimum hardware requirements. So you might need to have certain amount of space on your hard disk because it's a very large program that's going to be installed, or it may need a certain amount of RAM or some kind of special graphic capabilities. So when you're thinking about buying software though, I think the most important thing is to try and you never need to reinvent the wheel. If you're going to, if there's something you're trying to achieve, it's probably a good idea to have a look online and try and find out how other people are solving those kind of scenarios. So we're also underlining the philosophy of buying what you need and not what you want. So you need to think about kind of what you actually really do need, rather than nice to haves, which maybe come with a larger price tag.
Yeah, because all in one tends to be very enticing, doesn't it? It has a whole
Right.
of kind of hits a lot of sweet spots in your shopping list, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a new good. When you get it slower, it doesn't do what it says on the tin.
And also it might not be strong across the board, sure.
Okay.
I don't know if I want to say anything more about this. I think we might just move
on.
on.
Can I just ask something? It's important to know who the primary end user is. So if we're just writing CVs, we can't have a software that's too complicated to get into, to open up, to click the right boxes. So the end user is very important. Who's going to be using the laptop? If you're an organization, who are the clients? Who are the beneficiaries? What capacity for digital solving do they have? So the end user is very important.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And also licenses. Some packages can come with 5 licenses, come with 1 license. How important is that in the scheme of things to make sure you have the right amount of licenses at the time of purchase? Because there are different slides, usually a different sliding scale of prices. And if you're a big organization, you'll be using maybe 4 or 5 licenses, but if you're just a one person and you're one client, you'll be like buying the 1 license.
I can't disagree with that,
no. Yeah, but if you do have any problems or undecided, you can always give us a ring here at Millennium and we're more than happy to help. Next slide, please.
Thorny issues of data protection and security. Okay, so we're recommending using
it out.
Oh, it's 11:30.
Anyway.
Okay, so we're recommending that people take security quite seriously. So use strong passwords rather than don't stick the password on a post-it note on the screen, that kind of thing. If possible, get into something like 2-factor authentication, so also known as 2A. You might see it referred to as 2FA. That's the kind of system, kind of situation where you typically would have an app on your phone that generates a code, and then so you'll log into the system with your username and your password, and it will then prompt you for that extra code that you would need to have your phone. So if you imagine somebody hacking into you, they might have hacked your username and your password, but they'd also need to have got hold of your phone. So it's that much more unlikely that they're ever that you're gonna be breached in that way.
Can I just refer back to the passwords? 1, 2, 3, 4 is not a good password, is it? You need to.
Well, yeah, we said always use strong passwords.
Yeah, but we need to put characters, numbers, letters in there to make it really hard for people to hack it, because these hackers they're so good, they're getting it really quickly. So the more characters, the more letters, and the more numbers you put in there, the more complicated you make it.
Yeah, of course, but you also do want to make sure that you remember it and that it isn't so complicated that you actually find yourself in a situation where you're going to have to kind of hack the thing yourself.
Well, it always says forgotten password, doesn't it? And you can always
go through some tedious process where you have to recover your, sure. What was we going to say about this? So before you wipe your computer, make sure you have a backup of any files, and give some thought to how much personal information you're sharing online.
a lot of social media young people, they are remiss of leaving their passwords lying about. My niece leaves all her stuff in her phone. On the back of her phone, she puts it in pieces of paper and leaves it, and including her credit cards, and leaves it in the back of her phone, including her passwords. Not recommended.
Really not. Yeah, sure.
Not recommended. I mean, it may sound obvious, but you will be very surprised. She's a graduate and she's not stupid, but it's amazing how many young people do this. And they also put all their information on social media, and they even shoot their birthday parties. So the person trying to get that information has their date, has a bit more about them, which makes it easier for them to hack. So whilst these are obvious things, please try to enforce on your young clients how important it is to keep their data secure and put the minimal of information about themselves on the social media. They live on social media. And so does somebody else. So will the hackers. If they live on social media, so will the hackers. They do. How with you?
I'm ready to move on.
Can I just refresh?
Oh, you want to talk about some of the links you've got there?
Yeah, the digital protection companies. I've only put down a few here, but there are many you can Google and find. There's Avatar, which I haven't put down there, but you've got digitalguardian.com. You've got Norton, which are quite well known, and McAfee and Malwarebytes. Now, these companies also offer a personal package, which is free, which might suit you. But if you do have more licenses, if you do have more people using the computer, I suggest you invest in maybe the second package up, but that £10 a month or so. But the free downloads usually suffice. And there's also a thing called a CC cleaner, which is also free, that not only protects your password, but it cleans the computer at the same time. So CC cleaner, I haven't put it down there, sorry, is available. Just Google CC cleaner and it's on there. That's a good way of keeping your computer clean. It defrags and cleans over all the nonsense. Because once you surf on a computer, all that information stays there unless you clean it. It gets cleaned every day by the computer itself. It has its own defragging module, but it's also good to have an extra package, an extra part of housework, housekeeping. Keep your computer clean, help them to keep the computer clean and free from bugs and data. Update their data every day, if possible. Double check. Wipe data not using. Just keep your laptop in tip-top condition, basically, and it will last you forever, especially if you borrowed one. If it's on loan from an organization, just make sure you keep it clean, wipe your data, wipe your passwords, wipe all your information before you give it back. And there are loads of bags of organizations on Google which will take you through that process and show you how to do it. I couldn't put it down here because it's too lengthy. So, but just check the Google and they will show you how to wipe a computer properly before you return it.
Okay, so we're talking about a situation where the same organization is lending, a machine is going from one person to another.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And so you might not want to go through a lengthy process each time, and you might feel like there's a certain level of trust, in which case perhaps different people logging into the same machine but using different accounts on that machine, that might be acceptable some of the time, surely, right? Whereas I think once you get out of that field of trust that should exist within an organization, like so the machine really is being transferred elsewhere, then I think you need to consider that data security is going to really dictate that actually that machine needs to be properly wiped, and that's something that you're probably most people are going to need technical help with. either that, or are they going to have to look into how to do that properly? Because it's important to remember that when you click, if in a typical scenario on Windows or whatever, if you just hit delete on a file, what's happening is that file, the contents of that file actually really are still there. It's just like removing, it's more like removing the indexing entry for something in a book. So you've wiped out the computer's way of referencing that file, or it's the simple way of finding that file, but the actual data that was there is still physically on the drive, and somebody who knows what they're doing would be able to recover that.
Okay. All right, next slide, please.
Okay, so some general good habits for avoiding the pitfalls. So avoid clicking on links or attachments unless you know where they really are taking you, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a raft of emails which we're all getting from everywhere, even from the pseudo tax emails and pseudo TBT emails and pseudo parcel emails. If you're not expecting a parcel, or if your tax isn't due, just don't click on it, because once they get there, they will take over. We have to be very careful. PayPal, everything, eBay, Amazon, nothing's safe anymore. So if you have seen an email you're concerned with, check your account with that company first. Don't just click on the email, because then you'll know and you can see whether that's genuine or not. Otherwise, you will be in serious trouble. They will just take your computer over and just wreak havoc. And again, just to reaffirm, complex passwords is the way to go. And keep changing your passwords regularly, especially your email passwords, and make them as strong as possible. Always keep your identity safe, back up your data, ensure that you have a robust and up-to-date internet security package running, keep software up to date, and verify the website you are on is safe. If you join McAfee, for example, or Malwarebytes or Kaspersky, and another one, they will have ticks next to, when you Google, these bring up ticks next to the websites. So McAfee will have a red tick, Kaspersky has a green tick, and that means that they are safe and free from malware. So they are usually the ones to go for. And if it hasn't got that tick of security, don't go on that website, because it's full of malware, it's full of demons, basically, waiting to get you. Next slide, please. Where to buy a laptop? Am I getting the best deal?
Okay, so when we're talking about a clear budget, we're saying basically, it's very clear how much you've got to spend. Yeah, that's what that means, right?
Well, a clear budget means that you have to buy what you need. If you've got £150, for example, and then you need a budget and you need a laptop which has to be higher RAM or it goes bigger memory, you will have to either, but basically what it is making sure you've got the right laptop for the right job. And this, as Osman pointed out earlier on, if you don't need 8 GB and 1 TB, don't buy it. If you're just doing CVs or a bit of homework, you just need the most basic laptop. Preferred operating system, whether it be Windows or Apple. Generally, you probably find it's Windows, something that you can carry around, you can use for your dongle, and has the right connectivity when it's needed. I mean, yeah, well, not everyone on the organization is funded needs a fleet of top of the line machines. It's a waste of time to consider high cost options, if they don't suit your organization's purpose or bottom line. When buying a new laptop, it's advisable to stick to one manufacturer to simply maintenance and mobile devices management in the future. And the easiest management approach, maybe to have only one original manufacturer and 2 or 3 model variations. This makes a big difference when you're trying to fix a solution which maybe gone wrong on 2 or 3 laptops or 2 laptops. If they're all the same, then the solution will probably be the same. Well, a good example is Hoffman downloaded 40 laptops for one organization, but his problem, what he was worried about, and the first question he asked me was, are they all the same laptops?
Yeah, once I know I'm dealing with exactly the same piece of hardware, then basically we just had to figure out how to get one to work exactly as we wanted it to, and then we were able to just duplicate that setup onto the other 43 that we had, and that was something that we could do quite quickly just using some imaging software.
Yeah. So creative projects such as video editing often require pricey Macs or higher end Windows operating system options. Determining a range based on the type of beneficiaries or employees' needs in your organization. And if you need advice on price, once again, give Millennium a call and we'd be happy to help you. Next slide. Next slide. This guidance encourages you to refurbish laptops as much as possible to consider the environment. Refurbished laptops might also be found cheaper, but it will be important to ensure there are reputable suppliers and refurbished to a good standard. You might find it helpful to look at the guide from the Digital Inclusion Toolkit, which Emily has available. And I've said about laptop station, provide really best value good laptops, always in a pristine condition. The Lenovo Idea Pad is another good one. The Acer laptops and HP laptops. Well, I think I've spoken about that already. Next slide, please. Assistive tech. That's my bit. That's my bit. The concept of assistive technology inclusion has been in the domestic domain and workplace for over 20 years. It can help people learn and think differently about their challenges. You do not have to be an expert in assistive technology, just a willingness to learn and to help someone with a disability. To learn to help, AT is not a quick fix by any means. AT is something, it's quite complicated and quite complex to use, but you have to take the time to learn how to use it and to show somebody else how to use it as well. There's no point in buying Dragon speech-to-text software if you're not going to program it in properly for each user. Every user will have a different tone, and therefore the Dragon will operate to that person. So each person, just for example, each person will have to be programmed in individually for their tone of voice. That's the kind of example I'm trying to think about when I say be patient and willing to learn. Devices are pieces of smart equipment, digital smart equipment that increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of people with disabilities. There are low-tech options, which is a grab rail and a ramp, and then we're dealing with high-tech options like digital assistive technology, smartphones, tablets. And includes any software or hardware that can help a person accomplish tasks otherwise difficult for them to perform, and can play a vital role in connecting people to friends and essential services online. COVID just served to highlight this problem, but the thing is, people with disabilities were there before COVID and will be there after COVID. Please do not neglect, or please do not let that go past in your thoughts about future projects. Try to, as much as possible, to include people with disabilities because they want to get online too. and usually neglected, usually they're being left behind. Now it's a much more of a level playing field. The barriers are down due to the fact that a lot of the work is remote. So once upon a time, remote employers said, oh, there's no barrier, there's no ramp, there's no disability toilet. Now there's not that option. So people with disabilities have more chance of getting a remote job now, because you're not going to know whether they're disabled or not. You're not going to know whether they have autism or not. So we have to bring everybody up to be with their peers. We have to help people to be on the same level. It is really important. It's a future of London, it's a future of Britain. There are millions, sorted for 88 disabled people in Britain, with a huge capacities for learning, huge capacity for work. And there's also other pots of money that are available from the employers, meaning that access to work grants are available. So if there was somebody you knew with disability who wanted to work face-to-face, they can get an access to work grant, which enables them to have somebody help them or to buy the tools that they need to do a job. Many people aren't aware that all computers have built-in accessibility settings without needing an additional software or hardware. The settings are a great free way to test out accessibility to see what works for each other. I have noted down Windows, access to Windows accessibility, and also to the Apple accessibility. Apple is the computer choice for me. A lot more accessible tools. So if you are a recipient of the grant and you do have the budget and you are serving people with disabilities, which many of you put down, I do suggest you weigh up that option, which tool will be best for your clients. Yeah. Next slide, please. Right, understanding what devices are used is very important. I've only been able to list a few here. I can just go on about different technologies for hours, but I've just put down a few of them. Augmented and alternative communication devices, that helps people with struggle with speech like myself. Computer access devices allows problems use conventional controls like keyboard or mouse, which mice, which I mentioned earlier. Screen readers, a piece of software that reads out displayed text for visually challenged people. Screen magnifiers, magnifies all content on the web page, including images and videos. Text-to-speech software reads out text on the screen, or speech-to-text software writes out the spoken word to the screen. And switches can be designated for operation with a particular part of the body to get online. For example, it might be a switch which you can access by just tilting your head or by rubbing your elbow on your wheelchair. The stuff that's around is amazing, and I will be doing a deep dive webinar in a few weeks, so I hope that you will come along to that. Yeah, at the end of the month, I think, we'll talk about cover subjects like computer accessibility, adaptive equipment, and accessibility features in community use devices, including Windows, Android, Apple operating systems. The webinar will be the first step in establishing a knowledge around assistive technology to broaden awareness and accessibility of information. This process will enable us to widen the borough that can be shared more widely. So we're asking you to tell everybody, tell your mother, tell your father, tell carers, tell families that this is happening. Lambeth have been really supportive, and so we're continuing to fight the battle towards that. Yeah. Next slide, please. Summary. Well, connectivity. We've covered connectivity today. Difference between Wi-Fi, difference between broadband, laptop specifications, gigahertz and RAM, software operating systems, Microsoft, Linux, and Apple. Downloads, we have a page of downloads for you. Data protection and security, what to do and what not to do, where to buy your laptop, Amazon, eBay, laptop stations, assistive tech, which I've just finished explaining. And yeah, now it's time for Q&A. Questions, please.
Thanks, Gail. We have a couple questions in the chat already. I had one, but we'll let Nikki go first because she had her question first. So I don't know, Nikki, if you want to just jump in and ask that verbally, or I can read it out from the chat if you prefer.
Yeah, sure, that's fine. Basically, our target audience are children, so we don't need anything particularly high spec. And my question is, because I might have a couple of contacts where I can actually sort of like tag on, for example, a school. I'm actually a governor at a local primary school, and I was talking to a lady there, and she said, well, you could possibly order through the people that we order through. So my question basically is, I understand that refurbished is highly sought after because of the effect on the environment, but in, you know, while we've been on the webinar, I've actually been looking at Amazon, and they only sort of like offer 1 or 2 laptops at a time instead of sort of like 5 or 6 that we would probably need. And my question really is that does it have to be refurbished, factoring into the delivery charges on each individual unit, or am I able to source brand new ones at a cheaper price, more that instead of going somewhere like Curry's PC World, that sort of thing, really?
It's a case of shopping around. It's very, if you're buying in bulk, you have to go to one major manufacturer, and it's hard to buy a discounted or refurbished laptop all the same. I don't think you find that very hard.
No, you might find it's actually quite relevant to just find just low end new
but
stuff.
not all the same. Yeah. So you're not all the same models.
Right.
But you can, there won't be the same computers. You'll have to buy different computers because, as you pointed out, Amazon have 1 or 2.
Right.
eBay will have 1 or 2. Laptop Station will have 1 or 2. They won't have the same. You can't do that. And given your budget, I suggest you buy maybe laptops that can be suitable for you, if you can, all the same. But I don't know how much you're going to spend on them. What your budget is opposed to the grant you've received.
I think really, you know, we'd love to help as many families as we can, but that would obviously compromise on the spec of the laptops that we have. But as I say, our target audience are children probably between, well, sort of like mostly primary school children. So it's arguable about the sort of level. I mean, they're not going to be gamers. They're not going to be, you know, they're not going to be online for, you know, they're probably looking up BBC Bite Size. They're probably watching John Wicks do his dancing about in the mornings. If they actually have to then sort of like isolate again, then I mean, most of the parents that we have, they are connected to the internet. It's just the actual units that they have, you know, that they don't have many of. So as I say, the spec is not going to be huge, but it, you know, we want obviously connectivity in them to be able to do their homework. But yeah, so, you know, I can sit here for hours sourcing sort of 5 or 6 individual refurbished ones, or I can just buy 150, 200 pound ones at Curry's PC World or any other big manufacturer. I get them all in one go. I can negotiate probably internet security on there as well, and possibly Windows and you know, Office 365 as well. So basically that's really what I wanted to know. Are you insisting that we have the refurbished ones, or, you know, are we able to?
No, I was just pointing out that on the grant application, it says that they recommended refurbished laptops, but that's not set in stone, no.
Yeah, just to clarify, in terms of like the terms and conditions of the grant,
absolutely.
It's sort of, it's as you said, like, you're right to pull up, like, in the guidance, it does say, you know, we'd encourage people to like consider the environmental impact and, you know, consider using refurbished machines. But as you said, if you're especially if you're bulk buying quite low-end laptops. And I think there is a thing to consider. We're talking about some of the projects that are giving the devices out as sort of a gift. Some of them are running lending schemes. So if you are going to be kind of managing the laptops, Gil has mentioned in the presentation, it would probably be easier for your organization if you've bought all of the same machines, because you're going to have to be kind of doing a little bit of remote management, or wiping them when they come back. So that would probably be an easier process for you if you have basically identical machines as much as possible.
Noted. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'd also recommend get in touch with TechAid. TechAid have a lot of stock at the moment. They do have PCs and laptops. Okay. So maybe you can, if they have room, you can give them a PC instead of a laptop. But yeah, I will get in touch with TechAid as well. So see if they can top that up for you.
Lovely, I will do. Thank you very much.
Next question. Anybody? Where is it? Participate in the chat.
I asked in the chat, so I wouldn't forget, during the part about sort of security and antivirus software. I don't even remember if this is what it's called, but there used to be something on Windows machines that sort of came with them. I think if you had like Microsoft Office, you usually got Security Essentials, I think it was called. And if they're still doing like a sort of a free antivirus with new machines, is that sufficient? Like if people are buying machines from, say, Curry's PC World and they come with that on there, would you recommend that they buy an additional antivirus, or would that be adequate?
Personally, I think it is. I think that Microsoft have been working on this for a few years now. And they are getting. I think there's fewer things going wrong now. Yeah, but a lot of businesses out there do put a McAfee or something on there, but it's a bit of a personal choice. But my considered opinion is that Windows actually takes care of itself a bit better these days, and you pay the price of having those updates all of the time, and you're going to pay that price anyway. So a lot of the purpose of those updates that stop your computer starts insisting on doing, a lot of that's covering off security threats. So I would say that that's fine.
Yeah, can I say that I looked into this for TechAid for Windows, and I'm actually very confident, I'm confident that the current Windows built-in antivirus, anti-malware protection is good enough to not require adding all of these other things, which often are malware themselves, and they introduce all sorts of slowdowns to the machine for updating, pop-ups and other software and that sort of thing. So I would say that the current Windows Defender is fine for anti-malware stuff, antivirus.
Okay. Great.
And it's free. You don't have to buy it apart from the operating system.
Yeah, and I think the point about updates is quite important too, because like we said, some of these organizations will be giving the devices out and possibly offering some sort of ongoing management, but some will be running lending schemes. So you will want to think about making sure you're keeping these things updated. So if you get a device back and it's asking to run updates, you need to run the updates. And the more software you put on there, the more you're going to have to keep updated. And yeah, so that's good to know that if the inbuilt one is on your machine, it's probably good enough to stick with that.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, thank you, Emily, for pointing out a mistake about the Apple iOS, was to be Mac operating systems. The differences.
Yeah, it's called Mac OS. Yeah,
Mac OS. Yeah, I'm sorry, not iOS. Spelling mistake. Sorry.
That's okay. Any other questions in the last sort of 45 seconds? So we are going to run a sort of deeper dive into assistive tech, because obviously a lot of grant recipients did tick that they work with people with disabilities. So we want to make sure that everyone is actually kind of up to speed on how they can make their projects sort of as accessible as possible, and they're aware of all of the options out there. So we will be in touch with more information about that. probably later this week or early next week.